That concludes the business statement, and can I reassure members that we do have a list of members who have not managed to get in today. We now come to the Select Committee statement on behalf of the Justice Committee. Andy Slaughter will speak for up to 10 minutes, during which no interventions may be taken. At the conclusion of his statement, I will call members to ask questions on the subject of the statement. These should be brief questions, not full speeches. And can I emphasise that the questions should be directed to the Select Committee Chair and not the relevant Government Minister. I call Andy Slaughter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Backbench Business Committee for allocating time for me to make a statement on behalf of the Justice Committee. I'd like to make a statement regarding the Government's response to the Committee's 6th report to this Parliament, tackling the drugs crisis in our prisons. The report was published on the 31st of October 2025, and the Government response received on the 29th of December 2025 and published on the 9th of January 2026. Our inquiry was launched because the Committee was concerned by the growing level of drug use in prisons in England and Wales, and the profound damage it is doing to both the criminal justice system and individual prisoners. Our findings were bleak. The trade in and use of illicit drugs has reached endemic levels, creating a culture of acceptance where just shy of 40% of prisoners said they find it easy to acquire illicit substances. We found a system struggling to keep pace with changing drug use, where established substances are being replaced by highly potent synthetic opioids and cannabinoids, often sourced by organised criminal gangs. This crisis is not merely institutional, it is a human tragedy. Between December 2022 and December 2024, the Prisons and Probation Ombudsman investigated 833 deaths, of which 136 were classified as drug-related. While the Government has acknowledged the seriousness of the issue, we are disappointed by the response to our report that only accepts 8 out of 29 of our recommendations, while partially accepting 19 and rejecting 2. We feel the Government's response fails to match the urgency or degree of the drugs crisis in our prison. We ask for mandatory drug testing to be returned at least to pre-pandemic levels, and for wastewater testing to be rolled out faster, essential steps just to identify the source, the scale and nature of the drug problem. We called for more drug-free wings and for full body scanners to be provided in all prisons, essential steps to controlling drug ingress. These recommendations were not, however, agreed. The Chief Inspector of Prisons, Charlie Taylor, has described a menu of drugs entering our prisons through a variety of methods. Traditional routes such as social visits and post continue to be significant channels for smuggling in drugs, as do throwovers, i.e. packages thrown over prison walls. We heard of drugs being concealed in babies' nappies or new psychoactive substances being sprayed onto fake legal correspondence and children's drawings. A major failure of security is disrepair in the prison estate, which allows access through broken windows and collapsed netting. We recommended that prison governors be able to procure critical security repairs within 72 hours. The Government has rejected this in favour of existing facilities management contracts. When we visited HMP Brixton, we heard that it took 1 year to repair netting that had collapsed due to snowfall. While most prison staff are dedicated professionals, a small minority are manipulated by organised criminal gangs to smuggle drugs into prison. We recommend that all frontline staff undergo a mandatory face-to-face interview led by governors to improve screening. The Government has only partially accepted this. We believe that bypassing governor scrutiny in the hiring process facilitates criminal activity. During our inquiry, we took evidence from the Prisons Minister and HMPPS officials. We were provided with what we believe to be a clear and ambitious vision for vetting reform. We heard that HMPPS was moving towards a lifelong vetting model, ensuring that security assessments are not just a one-off event at entry, but a continuous process throughout an employee's career. We were told that the organisational position was to align the standards of HMPPS vetting with other Tier 1 agencies, such as the police. Our committee recommended that the Government commit to this lifelong vetting model as the minimum operational standard. In their response, the government stated that they do not accept the need for a lifelong vetting model as the minimum operational standard. Instead of the continuous lifelong assessment described to the committee in the ministerial session, the government has opted to re-vet staff only once every 3 to 5 years. We are alarmed by the paradigm shift caused by drones, which now deliver bespoke packages of drugs and other contraband, such as phones, directly to cell windows. There was a 770% increase in drone sightings between 2019 and 2023. An official at the MOJ told us that they had seen drones that could lift a moderate-sized person. One of the most concerning findings of our report is the dominant role that organised criminal gangs now play in the prison drugs trade. We have moved away from what was described as a cottage industry of small-scale smuggling towards a sophisticated gang-led structure. These gangs monopolise the lucrative prison market, where drugs can sell for up to 100 times their street value, fueling debt, intimidation and violence. Debt incurred by drug users is often collected from family members who, if they cannot pay inflated bills, are coerced into cuckooing or criminal activity. Prisoners in debt are also used as guinea pigs to test the potency of new untested drugs. We called for systems capable of tracking the electronic financial transactions that underpin organised crime operations within prison walls. As long as these criminal networks can communicate reliably through illicit smartphones to coordinate debt and supply, the crisis will only deepen. We acknowledge the £40 million investment in security infrastructure. However, the government's commitment to the committee's specific recommendations for disruption remains limited. While partially accepting our calls for better security, they have yet to commit to the rapid statewide development of a sky fence system, which is working well in Guernsey. We also addressed the drivers of demand. Our report found that 49% of prisoners enter the system with an identified drug need, yet the environment they find themselves in, routinely locked in cells for up to 22 hours a day, drives them further towards drugs as a form of escapism. Without access to work, education or therapeutic programs, prisoners are left in a state of idleness where drugs become a primary coping mechanism to get through their sentence. The government has accepted our recommendation to expand access to purposeful activities, but this will be contradicted by rumoured cuts in prison education. The physical and operational toll of drug use is catastrophic, characterised by a surge in medical emergencies known as code blues. These incidents divert essential healthcare resources and force regime restrictions, further reducing access to the very purposeful activities that might steer prisoners away from drugs. This environment has left frontline staff desensitised to the daily suffering and at risk of illness themselves due to secondary exposure to drugs. We called for substance misuse treatment to be commissioned separately from general healthcare contracts, a move supported by evidence from Dame Carol Black. The government's plan to transition responsibility to NHS integrated care boards falls short of this. The period immediately following release is a time of vulnerability, but the government has rejected our recommendation for universal rollout of take-home naloxone kits for those leaving custody, citing concerns over value for money. When 61% of post-release deaths are drug-related, we believe that saving lives must be the priority here. In conclusion, the government response lacks the comprehensive plan needed to gain control over this crisis. Without reform and investment, we are unlikely to tackle sophisticated supply networks, deficiencies in treatment, lack of purposeful activity, poor condition of the prison estate, and serious capacity pressures. Prisons will remain unstable, unsafe, and incapable of gaining controls over the drugs crisis. We know the prison service and ministerial team are committed to taking tangible and practical steps to control the prevalence of drugs in prison. Failure to do so undermines the government's whole programme of prison reform and their sincere intent to tackle the crisis in our prison, which they inherited. This is the problem for the current government to solve. I hope they will look again at some of the recommendations that we've made and increase the intensity with which we drive down the drug culture in prisons. It's the first step to ensuring that prisons are not only a place of safety, but a place of rehabilitation and reform.
Dr Neil Shastri-Hurst.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And does the honourable gentleman share my deep disappointment and concern at the position that the MOJ finds itself in, whereby research and development phase for counter-drone activity is not being strengthened to the stage whereby we're having frequent episodes of bypassing prison security?
Andy Slaughter.
I think it's particularly demoralising for prison staff and governors that they see drones coming and going on an almost casual basis. And the point I often make is if this were happening around civil airports or military facilities, it would be stopped immediately. And there is a problem which is not unique to this government, and it is in some way dictated by public mood, that prisons take a lower priority. But we've heard that drones can now bring in bespoke packages that they can lift considerable weights, perhaps even the weight of a person now. And this has become an immediate crisis, so I thank you for it.
Warinder Juss.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I remember walking around Featherstone and Oakwood prisons near my constituency of Wolverhampton West and seeing how well the incentivised substance-free living units appear to be working. And the government's own data suggests that those prisoners who are on those units are 30% less likely to be involved in violence or self-harm. So does my honourable friend agree that the government's decision to consolidate these living units instead of expanding them is actually a missed opportunity to improve upon safety and rehabilitation?
If I do, it was like the previous speaker, a very active member of the committee for that point. A lot of people would say, why do you have drug-free wings? Shouldn't prisons be drug-free per se? That's to ignore the reality of the situation. Providing drug-free wings, providing more drug-free wings, as he suggests, gives that opportunity for prisoners who wish to come off drugs, but who, if they're surrounded by a drug culture, find that very difficult to do. So again, that's one of the recommendations I would ask the government to look at again.
Bobby Dean.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the committee for their investigation to this important topic? He spoke a bit in his opening statement about the shocking developments of supply of drugs into prisons, but I wondered if he could expand a bit on the demand for drugs as well, i.e. the availability of rehabilitation services and other forms of support for addicts in prisons.
Andy Slaughter.
Where prisoners are caught with drugs, taking drugs through testing, and we've said we want testing increased as well, they need to be punished. I mean, that is a fact. But they also need to be offered treatment, and we called for a dual approach in relation to that. The committee is undertaking a major inquiry into rehabilitation at the moment, and we wanted to do almost as a preliminary to that, the drugs inquiry, because without control of the worst effects of drugs, rehabilitation is extremely difficult.
Jayne Kirkham.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I coincidentally went to visit HMP Wandsworth yesterday and was impressed by the progress that they've made in staff retention over the last year or so. They also have a new unit with support for prisoners with ASD, ADHD and addiction issues, and that seems to be working very well. Would the Honourable Member agree some of the points he made in his report, particularly about lack of staff on those wings, which means they cannot get a grip of what is happening on the wings because there just isn't enough of them? And those points about the central recruitment of staff and the vetting, I understand that prison officers are not interviewed face-to-face at all by the Governor or the prisons where they'll work. And the Honourable Member did make a point about that, about continued vetting, and does he agree that that face-to-face interview in the prison where those officers are going to work is very important?
Andy Slaughter.
That she's found progress being made at Wandsworth, and today we've got the publication of the independent investigation there, and staff are working incredibly hard, and prison officers do a dangerous and difficult job, and we can't say that often enough. There has been, after the disastrous actions of the previous government in reducing the number of prison officers to what I think were below safety levels. There has been a big recruitment campaign. The problem is that these are often new officers who don't have the experience. We lost a lot of the experience in prison officers. It's a difficult and dangerous job to do, and we need to not only support those officers, we need to provide them with the correct training.
Jim Shannon.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I thank the Chair of the Select Committee and his committee for all the hard work that they do. Back home, 41% of prisoners surveyed said it was easy to acquire illicit drugs, and worryingly, 28% reported developing a drug problem while in prison. I think those are replicated here in the report that the Honourable Gentleman has presented. Drugs are a UK-wide problem. Has the Select Committee had the opportunity to make this report available to the Policing and Justice Minister in Northern Ireland and to exchange ideas how to combat growing drug use in prisons? Thank you so much.
Andy Slaughter.
As always, the Honourable Gentleman gets to the heart of the matter, and I think that statistic he quoted, which is the number of people who develop a drug habit in prison, who go in there clean and come out with an addiction problem, really says all we need to know about the level of the endemic nature of the problem that I described. So yes, of course, we will share the report, and I hope that will be useful in Northern Ireland.
Lewis Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Honourable Gentleman and his committee for their work on this really important matter? I would like to ask about the recommendations regarding substance misuse treatment commissioning. Does he agree with me and Collective Voice, the umbrella organisation for drug treatment providers, that drug treatment services are entirely different to general health services and need to be commissioned separately? And there's not a DHSC minister in place today, but would he join me in calling for the Health Department to think again about the idea to transfer commissioning responsibilities to ICBs, particularly given the changes there going on? And does this not also reiterate the need for a joined-up drug strategy across the government with Home, Health and Justice Departments working together on this as a priority?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that, and this is an area of expertise for him. I mentioned Dame Carol Black with her recommendation, who is widely recognised as one of the best experts in this area, who successive governments have turned to, and she's very clear about that. And I've also seen the correspondence from Collective Voice, which again bears the authority of many organisations who are engaging with this issue across the country. Yeah, we do need to have, this is a distinct problem that needs a bespoke remedy, and I hope that, again, the government will hear that.
Chris Blah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Let me pay tribute to the Chair and his committee for his report, and my gratitude to the staff at HMP Hull on the edge of my constituency for all the work they're doing to support prisoners. I would be interested in the Chairman's metrics that he will be using for progress to meet the recommendations in his report by the end of this Parliament. What should we be asking him in 12 months' time or 24 months' time to see if this report and the recommendations are truly being met by government?
Well, first of all, I'm pleased to see members making links with their prisons, and I hope all members who have a prison will visit them regularly. I had the scrubs in my patch for 20 years. I'm also pleased that he wants to set targets for the committee rather than the committee doing all this. I hope that we will. This is something that we will monitor and follow up on a regular basis, because, as I've said, without control of the drugs problem in prison, so many other things become impossible to do. But if he wants to set some benchmarks, I'll ensure that we try and keep to those.
Lindsay Farnsworth.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to my honourable friend for speaking so powerfully on our committee's report. My honourable friend knows that I'm a huge supporter of policies which seek to maximise opportunities to rehabilitate offenders and prisoners. So I welcome the government's positive response to recommendation 6 in relation to purposeful activity. We know that purposeful activity or access there to purposeful activity is a huge benefit in rehabilitating offenders and stopping them from taking drugs whilst in prison through boredom. So could the recommendation requested that the government provide an update to the committee by April 2026 on the progress that has been made in relation to purposeful activity? Could the honourable member outline what he would hope to see in that update that would allow the committee to properly scrutinise the progress on that recommendation?
Well, again, I'm grateful to my friend who's also a very assiduous member of the committee. I want to finish on a positive note. Inevitably, in addressing this report, we concentrate on the problems and the issues where we don't feel the government is acting. But I am fully appreciative of the ministerial team, particularly Lord Timpson, but the whole team, are keen to resolve the issue of prison, and not just of overcrowding, not just of conditions, but of criminal activity involving drugs within prison. And the objective of that is to get prison numbers down, not by early releases, but by rehabilitation and cutting reoffending. So I see this as a series of stepping stones along to that route, and that much of the work that we do as a committee is linked together to that end, and I know that she will be a part of that process as well.
And that concludes the Select Committee statement.
Point of order.